Life's full of surprises. You can't predict them. That thought crossed my mind that evening as I sat in the cramped motel room alone with Dylan, my stepson. My husband Marcus had been away in another city for work the past few months, and the weight of his absence had begun to take its toll. I missed him, sure, but it wasn't just his physical absence that hurt. It was the emotional distance. His neglect, his lack of interest, had left a hollow space in me. Lonely nights gnawed at my soul, but I never could have imagined that asking Dylan to take me to his father would end with us stranded together in a tiny motel room, forced to share a single bed. I had no idea what was about to happen. Let me start from the beginning. Every little detail, trust me, the ending is far more unexpected than you'd think. That morning, as I grabbed my purse and glanced in the mirror before leaving the house, I sighed. I was tense, but despite it all, I still looked good. Even with Marcus leaving me so alone, I felt desirable. I felt alive. But those feelings weren't enough anymore. They didn't satisfy the emptiness growing inside me. In the kitchen, Dylan was finishing his breakfast when I called out to him from behind. "You're heading to college at the end of summer, I know, but you still need more practice driving. Come on, take me to your dad." He turned, flashing that same mischievous grin he always had. Dylan was a good kid, charming, funny, but he had a knack for being a troublemaker. "All right, stepmom," he teased, "but on one condition. Tell Dad to get me a better car for the summer." "We'll see," I answered, ushering him toward the door. Inside, I was only thinking about getting this trip over with. I had no clue it would turn out to be anything but smooth. We'd been driving for about 2 hours. I was in the back seat, idly scrolling through my phone, while Dylan hummed along to some random song on the radio, tossing out dumb jokes that made only him laugh. Then, all of a sudden, the car let out a horrible hiss before dying completely. "What was that?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. Dylan frowned. "I think the car just broke down," he muttered, pulling over to the side of the road. He tapped the wheel in frustration. So there we were, stuck in the middle of nowhere, barely any phone signal, and not a single soul around to help. We spent the next 2 hours arguing, calling every mechanic we could find and trying to get the damn car to start again. But after countless failed attempts, the reality hit us. We weren't going anywhere that night. Our only option was to check into the nearest motel and wait until morning. At the front desk, while Dylan spoke with the motel clerk, I stood behind him, arms crossed, frustration bubbling inside me. If Marcus finds out about this, he's going to flip, I thought. But deep down, something in me whispered that it didn't matter as much as it should have. I just knew, somehow, that tonight was going to change things. When we finally got the room and opened the door, any hope I had of being remotely comfortable vanished. The space was tiny, barely big enough for the two of us to turn around in. A single bed, a nightstand, a dim, flickering overhead light that made everything look dingy. The ceiling felt low, the air conditioning barely worked, and the only window had a miserable view of the parking lot. "This is it," I muttered, disappointment dripping from my voice. Dylan let out a short laugh. "Not exactly luxury accommodations, huh?" I shot him a look, but couldn't help the small smirk that crept onto my face. "You could say that." With no other option, I sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples. Dylan tossed his bag onto the floor, stretching his arms behind his head. "Well, we might as well make the best of it." I sighed. "Yeah, I guess we have no choice." We spent the next hour trying to get comfortable in the uncomfortable space. The motel's outdated television flickered weakly as we searched for something to distract us. But the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. Maybe it was the situation, the unexpected closeness, the forced intimacy of sharing such a small space. Maybe it was the months of loneliness I had been enduring, the growing sense that Marcus had all but forgotten me. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that I wasn't alone for once. Whatever it was there, unspoken, lingering in the air between us. And I had no idea how the night would end. Dylan walked in behind me, laughing. "What did you expect, a 5-star hotel? Relax, stepmom, it's just one night." That teasing tone again, that same smirk. It drove me nuts, but at the same time it sparked something inside me that I couldn't quite explain. And though I hated to admit it, the idea of being stuck here alone with Dylan tonight didn't seem all that bad. "This heat is killing me," I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. "I think I need a shower or I'm seriously going to pass out." Sure, Dylan replied casually, throwing himself onto the bed and lying flat on his back. "This is your kingdom, Carmen. Do whatever you need to feel at home." I glanced at him for a second. His lean but toned frame, mixed with the lingering boyishness in his face, gave him an unusual kind of charm. But I quickly shook the thought from my head. He was Marcus's son, my stepson. I stepped into the bathroom and shut the door behind me. For a moment, I simply stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair clung to my skin from the heat, but I still looked good. I still had that spark. Turning the shower on, I let the water run before stepping under it, hoping it would wash away the mess of emotions building inside me. I was 47 years old. And Dylan wasn't a kid anymore. He was 22, about to start college. And here we were, stuck together in this tiny motel room for the night. The thought both unsettled and excited me in a way I couldn't quite describe. Marcus popped into my mind. Marcus. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to come see you, to be with you. But now I'm here, stuck in this motel room with your son, and I don't know how to feel about it. The steam from the shower filled the small bathroom, the heat relaxing my body even as my mind raced. Dylan's grin, his easygoing nature, it was sparking something unexpected inside me. Standing under the stream of water, I couldn't tell what this feeling might turn into, but I knew something was changing. Later, I decided to head downstairs for dinner and clear my head. I threw on a light, flowy dress, perfect for the heat, but also something that made me feel at ease, as if I were trying to shake off the strange tension between us. The motel restaurant was simple but cozy, fitting for a place this small. I ordered a light meal and a glass of wine, hoping it would help me unwind. Outside, the sun had set, and the glow of the streetlights cast soft shadows through the windows. Sitting there, I couldn't stop my mind from wandering back to the room upstairs. I wonder what Dylan's up to right now, I thought. Someone as restless and full of energy as him probably wasn't enjoying being cooped up in a cramped room, but somehow that relaxed effortless attitude of his, so completely carefree, was driving me crazy in a way I couldn't quite explain. When my wine was gone, I pushed my plate aside, took a slow breath, and made my way upstairs, my footsteps measured and unhurried. As I reached the door, everything was quiet. I turned the knob, pushed it open, and the sight that greeted me left me momentarily breathless. Dylan had taken a shower and was lying on the bed, completely knocked out, wearing only a robe. The fabric had loosened slightly, revealing most of his lean, fit body. His damp hair fell over his forehead, and a faint smile played on his lips as if he were lost in a dream. My heart started pounding. It was the last thing I expected to walk into. For a second, I froze by the door, unsure of what to do. Inside me, a strange mix of emotions swirled. I felt embarrassed, yet I couldn't take my eyes off him. "Carmen, what the hell are you doing?" "That's Marcus's son," I scolded myself internally, but my gaze betrayed me, drawn to the way his robe had slipped further open. What I saw stirred something warm inside me, something I didn't want to acknowledge. The small size of the room only made things worse. There wasn't another bed. It was either sleep next to him or spend the rest of the night in a chair. And in this heat, the thought of a chair seemed unbearable. Slowly, I stepped into the room, Dylan's steady, rhythmic breathing filling the space. I took a deep breath, trying to focus, but the chaos inside me made it impossible to think straight. I had to pull myself together. "Okay, Carmen," I muttered under my breath. "It's just one night. Nothing more. This doesn't mean anything." I had come to surprise Marcus, and now I was stuck here. Be rational. Keep it together. Taking a few steps toward the bed, I looked down at Dylan. The innocent expression on his face only made my already tangled thoughts more complicated. I sat down on the edge of the bed, wondering how I was going to make it through the night. In the middle of the night, a soft sound woke me. Barely opening my eyes, I scanned the room. Dylan shifted on the bed, stretching slightly, his hands running through his damp hair before scratching the back of his head. I found myself watching him through half-lidded eyes, pretending to still be drowsy. Inside, though, I was anything but calm. Then I felt it. His eyes on me. My heart started racing. He was watching me. I tried to keep up the act, maintaining a sleepy look, staying still, but I could feel the tension in the air thickening. Slowly, Dylan reached for the belt of his robe, untying it absent-mindedly. As the fabric loosened, it slipped from his shoulders, revealing more of his toned frame. The way his muscles moved with each slight motion sent an unexpected warmth through me. I couldn't stop myself. In that moment, I realized two things. I had no control over what was happening, and part of me didn't even want to stop it. Dylan pulled out a pair of shorts from his bag, standing up to put them on. As he did, he kept glancing back at me as if trying to determine whether I was awake. The way his eyes lingered sent a shiver through me. His looks made me even more aware of the unspoken tension between us, an energy I was trying desperately to ignore. After slipping on the shorts, he didn't immediately return to bed. Instead, he sat in the chair in the corner of the room, his gaze fixed on me. The weight of his stare sent a wave of heat through my body, making it harder to maintain the illusion of sleep. Being watched so intently was both unsettling and exhilarating in a way I couldn't describe. I kept my eyes shut, pretending to sleep, but how long could I really keep up this act? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat up slowly, my breath uneven as I met Dylan's gaze. The room was thick with unspoken tension. I made sure my voice didn't tremble as I spoke, my words carrying more weight than I intended. "You're making me so excited, Dylan." I could feel those words hanging in the air. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Dylan's eyes flickered for a second before he took a deep breath, his voice low but steady. "I don't know, Carmen," he admitted. "We've been living under the same roof for a while now, ever since my dad's been away, and the more time we spend together, the more I feel for you. You might not realize it, but sometimes I can't hide the admiration I have for you. Right now, this feels like some kind of dream." His words caught me off guard, yet they stirred something deep inside me. Dylan wasn't looking away. His gaze held mine with an honesty and intensity that left me completely captivated. "I have to get up early to get the car fixed," he continued, though his voice sounded as if he was trying to convince himself more than me. But his gaze didn't waver, not even a little. "Right now, I just can't take my eyes off you, Carmen. I've never felt this way before." My heart pounded. Slowly, I moved to the edge of the bed and sat down on the chair right in front of him, locking eyes with his. The energy between us was electric, too intense to need words. For a moment, we sat in silence, a silent conversation passing between us. Then I pursed my lips slightly, my eyes never leaving his. "Dylan," I said, my voice carrying both curiosity and a challenge, "are we talking about the same thing?" His gaze deepened, filled with an emotion he couldn't or wouldn't put into words. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. That was when I realized there was no turning back for us. As I stared into his eyes, a surge of courage and undeniable desire welled up inside me. The mix of hesitation and passion in his expression only pushed me further. Taking a deep breath, I spoke again, my voice calm but firm. "Dylan," I said, drawing his full attention, "when I came into the room, you were asleep. Your robe was slightly open, and I couldn't take my eyes off you. It got to me more than I expected. We can't run from these feelings. We both know that." As my words lingered between us, I took a step forward and slowly stood up. His eyes followed my every move, his breathing quickening. The excitement building inside me was impossible to ignore. My fingers found the sash of my dress, and as I slowly untied it, I could hear the change in his breath with every motion I made. "I think," I whispered, my voice dropping lower, "we need to even things out." I reached behind me, my fingers slowly unzipping the back of my dress. The fabric slipped from my shoulders, sliding down to the floor. The cool air against my skin only made the heat within me burn stronger. The look in his eyes spoke volumes: surprise, admiration, and a pull he couldn't resist. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was charged, a bond neither of us wanted to break. Our breaths mingled, the air between us thick with anticipation. Without looking away, I took another step toward him. "Now," I murmured, my voice laced with something unspoken, "let's see if we're really talking about the same thing." Dylan's eyes remained locked on mine, his expression unwavering, filled with fire. Suddenly, he stood up, never breaking eye contact. He moved with quiet determination, walking to the door and locking it behind him. My pulse raced. At that moment, it felt like the whole world had slowed down, leaving just the two of us in the soft glow of the room. And for the first time, I didn't want to resist whatever was about to happen. When Dylan took a step toward me, my breathing quickened. His eyes searched mine as if trying to decipher what I was thinking, but at the same time, we both knew. Without words, the pull between us was undeniable. As he got closer, his hands found my waist, and the warmth of his touch sent an electric current through me. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His gaze dropped to my lips, and I didn't move away. I couldn't. Everything about this felt natural, as if it had been building up all along, waiting for this very moment. When his lips finally met mine, all the tension inside me melted away. His kiss was slow, exploratory, but carried an undeniable passion. My hands instinctively reached for his shoulders, feeling the strength beneath my fingertips, warmth radiating from him. The space between us disappeared completely as our breaths mingled, merging in the dimly lit motel room. The moment felt like an explosion of everything unspoken between us. Dylan's youth and energy collided with the depth of passion I had carried for years. It was the start of something new, something both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, there was no hiding from what we felt for each other anymore. As I let myself fall back onto the bed, my body was exhausted, but my mind raced. My breathing remained uneven, my foot brushing against the fabric of my dress lying on the floor. I felt Dylan's eyes on me, an intense and quiet energy radiating from his gaze. A moment later, he bent down and picked up the dress, his fingers lightly grazing where my foot had been. Even that simple touch sent sparks through me. He held the dress for a second, hesitation flickering in his expression, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He set it aside and moved toward the edge of the bed. Slowly, carefully, he climbed onto the mattress, his movements deliberate. As he got closer to me, the look on his face revealed everything: excitement, tension, an almost magnetic pull. Lying on the other side of the bed, I could feel his closeness, my heart continuing to race, my breathing deepening. When he leaned toward me, I realized just how little space remained between us. It was as if everything had reached a breaking point. There was no turning back now, and the intensity of it all was overwhelming. It both terrified and thrilled me at the same time. I turned my gaze to the ceiling, but I could still see Dylan in my peripheral vision, smoothing his hair back with one hand. His face was flushed, his breathing uneven, and his expression raw with emotion. He wasn't just excited. He was happy, completely absorbed in this moment, his every movement filled with passion. It moved me in a way I hadn't expected. Dylan had accelerated every emotion inside me to a dizzying level. For the first time since our journey began, I found myself grateful the car had broken down. "I'll never forget this hotel," Dylan murmured, his voice trembling slightly. Each word felt weighted, drawn out as if spoken between deep breaths. His eyes were still locked on mine, but his hands were shaking, his entire body taut with restrained energy. Each of his movements was precise, as if he wanted to capture every second in his memory. "I definitely don't want my dad to sell the car anymore," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, without another word, he let himself fall back onto the bed beside me. He closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling as he tried to steady his breathing. I lay there, exhausted, unable to form a single word. My legs wouldn't stop trembling, my mind caught between reality and the whirlwind of emotions still coursing through me. I hadn't even realized when I had drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Dylan returned with the car fixed, his expression unreadable. "We need to pick up Marcus and head to the city," he said, his voice steady, but I could sense the underlying tension in his tone. As we drove, my mind was a tangled mess of emotions: regret, excitement, fear. Every now and then, I stole glances at Dylan, his hands gripping the wheel, his posture stiff. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were filled with something unspoken, something that mirrored the storm inside me. Everything about him affected me. His movements, his voice, the way he glanced at me when he thought I wasn't looking. It was all too much. Everything was complicated, yet it felt inevitable. I still didn't know what would happen next. I couldn't decide between the lingering questions in my mind and the undeniable excitement thrumming beneath my skin. But there was one thing I knew for sure. This journey wasn't just a drive back to Marcus. This was the moment that changed everything. What was the one thing that tested a woman's boundaries the most? I paused for a moment, thinking. Time? No. The years had settled on me gently. I had long since learned that it wasn't about age, but about how you lived. Relationships? No, not that either. I had been married to Alex for 12 years. We were in sync, no problems, at least no big ones. But some things you couldn't quite name, things you refused to acknowledge, still lingered. And for a while now, something nameless had been stirring inside me. Ethan, Alex's son from his first marriage. From the very beginning, the word step had always felt too sharp, too distant. I hadn't raised him, but he had been in my life for years. Now he was 25, successful, charismatic, handsome, yet still reserved, introverted, always holding back. And that distance, that invisible wall between us, was what unsettled me the most. That one step he always kept between us, like he was waiting, but for what? He didn't even know, and that was what made it dangerous. That was why I had always made sure we were never alone for too long. If Alex was with us, everything stayed in balance. The lines were clear, everything was safe. The San Francisco business trip had been planned perfectly. Alex was supposed to come, as always, but that morning, as we sat around the breakfast table, he paused mid-sentence while talking about his project. "I won't make it. You two go ahead without me." Second. What? I blinked, thinking he had to be joking. But no. He took a sip of his coffee, his decision already made. What? Ethan's eyes traced the lines on his plate. "I don't have to go either, Dad." Alex shook his head. "No. It's important that you go with Claire. You need the experience. Being around her will teach you a lot." As I listened to how innocently Alex spoke, I was feeling something entirely different. A small knot tightened in my stomach. For a brief moment, my eyes flickered to Ethan. He was already looking at me, and in that moment, those eyes, it only lasted a few seconds, but in those few seconds, I felt exactly what I had been trying to avoid. We were going to be very alone. Alex stood up, resting a hand on my shoulder as he smiled. "Take care of him," he said playfully, as if I was the one who didn't need protecting. But there was something Alex didn't know.